All right, so we are live and we have about 30 seconds left until we are at the top of the hour to begin today's broadcast. I want to welcome you. I am your host, Michael Giannotti. I'm being joined by Amir Gabrieli, and we will be kicking off in just a matter of seconds. At that point, we'll introduce today's topic, and then we will begin the broadcast. And it is now 12 noon. So it's time to begin. So welcome to today's broadcast, Threat Management in an Increasingly Hostile Environment. My name is Michael Giannotti. I will be your host today. And during today's session, if you look below the video and the PowerPoint that you're seeing, you will see there is a Q&A box. If you post questions there, I will be monitoring the Q&A, and I'll be able to tee those up for Amir, who will be delivering today's broadcast. But without any further ado, I'm going to kick this on over to today's presenter. Amir, would you like to introduce yourself? And It's all yours.
Thank you so much, Mike. Thank you for the introduction. So hello all, and thank you for joining us for this session today, a fascinating topic about threat management in an increasingly hostile environment. This will be the third and final security session that we had in a series of 3 discussions. It started with identity perimeter, how to secure your identity and create a new identity security perimeter. We had a discussion about information protection, and today we're going to talk about threat management, or how to empower your SOC and security folks with better tools to address the increasingly hostile environment. Mike, am I projecting?
You are.
All right, so let's start. So just to introduce myself very quickly, my name is Amir Gabrieli. I'm a security specialist with Microsoft. I actually joined Microsoft about 2.5 years ago with an acquisition of a company from the cybersecurity space. So I'm kind of a cybersecurity resource in Microsoft, and I'm doing much of those education sessions to introduce our customers and the market to Microsoft technology strategy. Let's start today. Mike, can you confirm that you can see the agenda slide?
Yeah, let me pull. That's what I'm pulling up right now. Yes, we can.
All right. So our agenda for today, we're going to start by talking about the increasingly hostile IT environment. Really, the escalation in cyber attacks that we see in the market today, and how they impact those security teams that are supposed to help the organization to protect against them, how they can deal with the escalation in cybersecurity attacks. Then we're going to talk about Microsoft's approach to address this escalation, and we call it Modern SoC. It's really the building blocks that Microsoft provides to build a modern SoC that is better equipped or geared to deal with escalation in cyber attacks. Next phase, we're going to do a breakdown of the Microsoft threat management technology, or what kind of technology Microsoft can provide to help security operations detect and respond to threats and attack across the Office 365 landscape, endpoint, desktop, network, cloud application, and across the identity. We'll finish with a few words about a phishing attack, because phishing is a critical element in threat management. And we're going to do a quick summary, and we'll give you some time for Q&A. Troublesome times. All right, so let's kind of look at some statistics to set the context for the discussion today. I'm sure that all of you are reading the news and are aware to the escalation in cyber attacks that we see in the market today. It's just every day you see more and more companies being hit in the news, and to be honest, it's even more than that. Many companies that have been breached, try to conceal that, and you don't even see that in the newspapers. Me specifically, being a security specialist in Microsoft, I'm exposed. I'm actually being called by many companies that have been breached to figure out why they've been breached and how could they fortify themselves better to protect against the breach that was successful in their environment and future breaches. But the statistics are very sad. You can see here that in average, the cost for a data breach is around 4 million. 85% starts with a weak stolen password. There's hundreds of thousands of new malware and viruses samples created every day. If you've been breached into a typical security organization, it takes more than 200 days until they figure out that the attackers are working in their environment, stealing data, or doing whatever they're doing there. And two very important statistics that I do want to talk about today are the ones that you see here at the bottom left of the table. 46% of compromised systems had no malware on them. It means that 50%, almost 50% of the compromised machines that was used by attackers to infiltrate, to steal data, and to do any malicious activity were not attacked by viruses and malwares. The attacker used legitimate technology that is offered as part of the Microsoft portfolio to penetrate and get persistency inside the devices, and antiviruses and anti-malware technology simply can't detect that because there's no signatures, no malware, nothing. It's in-memory attacks. They know how to move in memory with no signature at the hard disk itself. The second one is phishing attack. And the problem today is that if someone targets your organization for a social engineering attack, for a phishing attack, they will probably be successful. It's almost impossible to prevent credential theft from a phishing attack. Now, taking those statistics into consideration, the way that the attackers are doing today, the escalation that we see in the market is not only in the number of attacks, it's also in the sophistication of attacks. And those attackers know very quickly how to exploit zero-day attacks that most companies are not protected from. This is the idea of a zero-day attack. It's a new exploit that is being used. How to steal credential, how to leverage insider threat, how to move laterally in the environment with a legitimate technology that your antiviruses and anti-malwares can detect. And this is a reality for security organizations today, and they need to scale. The security organizations themselves need to scale to address this escalation in volume and sophistication of attacks. And the question how they can scale against it. And there's two ways to scale against it. One is to scale by hiring more security specialists, more security analysts that will sit in the SOC and will constantly search for those indication of compromise or indication of attacks in your network. Or you can scale with technology, and I'm here to talk about what Microsoft has from a technology perspective to empower security operation with a better tool set to detect, investigate, and respond to a modern and sophisticated attack. And the focus here is modern and sophisticated attack, those attacks that are not detected by malware and antiviruses, that require specialized tools, machine learning, user and entity behavioral analytics to detect in your environment. So let's talk about building a modern SOC, or how to build a SOC that is better equipped to deal with the escalation, a SOC that will significantly reduce the time from detection to response of an attack, of a breach, right? And it's really built on four building blocks, at least from Microsoft's perspective. The first main building block, which I'm going to cover later, is changing the mode of operation of the SOC from assuming I'm protected and being surprised that I was breached to a mode that you constantly assume compromise. Your mode of operation in the SOCs constantly assumes that you've been compromised. The second building block is be connected to a cloud cyber intelligence. So you need, in order to be protected, you need to be connected to a cyber intelligence technology that will make sure that your defenses are constantly up to date against recent threats. And we're going to talk about that. This is essential today as attacks are emerging very quickly and quickly to leverage new exploits that have been identified. Automation is key. And we're talking automation in the investigation, in the detection process, in the investigation process, and the remediation, the response process to a breach. And altogether, we're looking for technologies, for methods to improve the detection, investigation, and response time, to minimize the time the time to detect of new threats, new breaches, until you can respond to those. So let's continue and try to figure out and maybe expand on some of those principles. Let's start with assume compromise. So I'm working with a lot of security organizations today, and many of them take the stand of buying best-of-breed prevention technology, best-of-breed antiviruses, best-of-breed firewalls, best-of-breed email protection technology, and they rely on those best-of-breed technology to mitigate most of the known threats. And typically, they're surprised when they're being breached. But as we saw earlier, the methods used by attacker today can in many cases go across those protection. If you use legitimate actions while you're within within an email or within a desktop, then it's very hard to detect that with antiviruses and anti-malware, because those legitimate actions don't have any signature that can be identified by those protection capabilities. So the idea that Microsoft is trying to deliver to the market, it's actually not Microsoft, it's a concept in the market, is change the mode of operation of the SOCs to assume compromise. Constantly take the assumption that you've already been compromised and use machine learning, use user and entity behavioral analytics techniques, read the logs, figure out what might be suspicious in your behavior, right? In the behavior of your users, in the behavior of the users in your network, in the behavior of the endpoints. Constantly assume that you compromise and try to find patterns to justify that. Don't wait until it happened and then do an investigation. Do a continuous investigation based on malicious patterns, leveraging advanced technology, as I mentioned, like machine learning, user and entity behavioral analytics, and log processing, and more. Now, the framework in the market is not a Microsoft framework, it's a market framework to enable that. This transition is called Protect, Detect, and Respond. And it basically says that you need to do as much as you can to protect the entire network that you have, all of your assets. So do the maximum there, but always take this approach of detect and constantly search the network, the behavior, the endpoints for anything that may suggest a suspicious activity in your environment. And once you identify that, suggest either an automatic response to the threat or suggest a response to the security operation for a team. Now, there's two ways to implement that. The way that most organizations implement it today is in the protect, detect, response flow, is that they basically configure all of their security technology, security for the identity, security for application, security for data, DLP, security for infrastructure, intrusion detection systems, network protection solutions, CASB, protection for devices. They configure them so that all of their logs will be sent to a SIEM, or it's going to be processed. The SIEM is a component that is responsible to do the log analysis and identify patterns that may suggest that you've been breached. These are being notified to a security specialist, which can basically take an investigation through those logs and take action. So this is today model for protect, detect, response, but it has some limitation. Some of the limitations start with the basic that the SIEM itself is not a specialized tool, and in order to find those attacks, those patterns of possible malicious activity, it relies on the logs that are received from all the specialized tools. But those logs may be missing some information, right? So I'll give you, those logs do not have all the information, and this is a limitation for the SIEM because it relies on logs and it doesn't really have the full context that the actual tool has. That's one thing. The second thing is that the SIEM itself, when processing the logs, it's a little bit of post-mortem because the incident had already happened. And now the analysts need to do an investigation and response to an attack that already succeeded. So this is more or less what we see today in the market. But the statistics behind this model are not so great. So if you talk about the attackers typically they detect them between 24 to 48 hours to get domain dominance after they had the initial breach. While from the analyst perspective, it takes about 150 days to identify a breach and respond to it. And because there's so many alerts, analysts are busy, and the reality today is that only 4% of the alerts are actually investigated. The way that Microsoft does that is by embedding the protect, detect, and respond sequence or flow to the specialized tool. So now the security controls themselves, the security controls that manage identity security, application security, data security, infrastructure security, device security, they're embedded with the technology not only to protect, but also to do detect and respond. And because those specialized tools are doing that, they have more visibilities, they have more context to do an investigation. It's not only based on logs, it's based on contextual information that is available at the tool, at the specialized tool level. So they can process all the information and make better decisions, identify better alerts that are associated with a possible breach, and also respond automatically to breaches or create a highly contextual alert to the SIEM, so the analysts now get a highly contextual alert with some guidance about how to respond to that. And let me maybe give you some example. First example that I want to give is pass the hash, pass the ticket attacks. Okay, in order to identify pass the hash or pass the ticket attacks, which are the #1 threat for Active Directory, if you rely on logs only, it's almost impossible to detect this attack because the ticket itself is not available in the log. And so those SIEMs cannot really see a usage of the same ticket for multiple machines at the same time. However, in Microsoft, the technology that is responsible on monitoring the AD traffic can do that in real time and capture the ticket information from the network itself. We're doing layer 7 inspection. So from that level, from the specialized tool that sits on the Active Directory and constantly monitor the activity, we can identify by parsing the network tickets and see that the same ticket is used for multiple machines that may suggest a pass a hash, pass a ticket solution. So when we create an alert, we create a contextual alert telling the SIEM that we've seen a ticket coming from both machines, and we can suggest actions like suspend the user or isolate the machine and so forth. That's an example of how those specialized tools have better ability to do the detect and response, which is not based on log processing, but based on contextual and real-time data that they have other processing possible threats. Another example is files. Let's say that you had a DLP breach and you want to figure out which sensitive files were downloaded from a specific device. If you look at the log of most CASBs today that are responsible on following up on file downloads, you'll be able to see the name of the file that was downloaded, but not its sensitivity. However, if you do that at the CASB level itself, the CASB is a component that is responsible to monitor the activity and find suspicious activity. The CASB knows the classification of the file and can immediately let you know if a sensitive file was downloaded by a user and create an alert letting you know that a sensitive file was downloaded by the user and suggest action like quarantine the user, quarantine the file, remove association between the user to the file, and so on. Another example that I want to give you here is at the identity front. Okay, in Microsoft identity solution, when an identity is asking to access a cloud service, for example, part of the sequence is to check if the identity is associated with any kind of malicious activity. So we go to the intelligence, which activated user and entity behavioral analytics, to see if this identity is somehow associated with a suspicious activity like a brute force attack, or maybe this identity is calling from new locations that we haven't never seen them logging into the system to, and then we can take action. The detect and response are done before we allow access to the service, and a response to a suspicious activity could be to block the user from getting to the service, to challenge the user with MFA, or to reset the password of the user. But the idea here is that the response is done before the user gets access to the service, and not after. We can actually use our detection capabilities to block users before they get access, before they can do damage to the system. So this is a protect, detect, and response flow in Microsoft. Let's talk about the importance of being connected to a cloud intelligence source, okay? And the reason that you want your system to be constantly connected to a cloud-based intelligence is that because you want to make sure that your defenses are constantly up to date on recent threats, on recent alerts, right? In Microsoft, we have a technology called Security Graph, the Microsoft Intelligence Security Graph, and this is where we get security events from all of our estate across all the globe. So consider how much information Microsoft gets in the Microsoft Security Graph. We have information from all of our Azure tenants, all the emails that our antiviruses are scanning, all the emails and files that are detonated in our sandbox, in our detonation chambers. We see all the users' access requests. We can follow the users' activities. We get notification from all of our devices about how they behave and who they're connected with. And all of this is sent to the intelligence security graph, where on top of that we have machine learning and entity and user behavioral analytics that constantly process this global information to find indication of emerging threats. Once we identify those emerging threats, we'll, if possible, automatically create new signatures and update our defenses across the entire globe. Let me give you an example. Let's say that there's a new zero-day attack, a new exploit that was identified in the market, and it's being used to attack a hospital, let's say in the UK, right? So this exploit will hit the UK, probably will detonate it in our detonation chamber, and if we identify any malicious activity that is associated with this attachment, with this email, then we'll immediately create a signature for that new possible attack and update all of our defenses, all of our tenants, all of our antiviruses will know about this new exploit, about this new file that leverage the exploit, and we'll be able to protect all of our other tenants almost immediately. The idea is that with Microsoft size, with the visibility that we exposure that we have to so many security events at the global scale, our ability to detect new threats and quickly integrate our defenses to all of our technology stack is unique. Visibility throughout the attack stages. Now let's say that you're an organization and you have multiple security controls. One of them is a network-based intrusion detection system. And one time your network intrusion detection system identify a malicious TCP/IP call from one of your endpoints to an IP, to a suspicious or to a malicious IP outside of the organization. So very nice. Your technology was able to find a possible attack. However, now you need to start doing manual investigation, go to the device, figure out which process sent this TCP/IP request, then figure out how this process or this file go to the desktop, to the specific desktop, and maybe try to figure out which other desktop were infected with this file and then take action. There's a lot of aftermath investigation to do just to figure out how this file go to the endpoint. Now, this is really tied to what we call the attacker kill chain. So when you analyze it, attackers typically take the same flow to attack a company. They start by trying to infiltrate into one of the endpoints. That could be through an email or through other file collaboration technologies. They can either use some exploits in the browser or in specific applications that you have, leverage a zero-day attack and an exploit to get into the device. Once the attacker is in your endpoint, they'll try to escalate to higher privileges or maybe steal the ticket of an admin users so they can start lateral movement in the network, maybe get to other devices and apply their malware over there, and eventually they're targeting the domain controller where they get to domain dominance, right? So in Microsoft, what we're doing basically is aligning our advanced threat protection capability, our ability to detect and respond through the attacker kill chain. At the Office level, we have Office 365 Advanced Threat Protection, which is all about detecting and responding to threats on the Office 365 environment. So emails, files that are being shared, we'll monitor those. Then we have Windows Defender Advanced Threat Protection, which is how we detect and respond to malicious activity and suspicious activity at the endpoint, specific endpoint. And then we have Azure ATP, or also Advanced Threat Analytics. It has multiple names, where we'll monitor your network for suspicious activity that may be associated with the lateral movement. Now, each of those technologies can identify a malicious activity or part of a malicious activity at the areas or the space that he's responsible for, but those tools integrate. And as you investigate, you can pivot your investigation between those technologies to do an investigation in context. So you can basically seize all the different steps of the attack and get visibility to the end-to-end attack using our specialized technology and the integration between those technologies. And this is really what the security teams want to do. This is what they're expected to do. They're expected to get full understanding to the attack, starting from how they infiltrated into the machines, which machine were breached, who's patient zero, and what those breached identities are doing on the network. Automatic response. So Microsoft recently acquired a company called Hexadite, and Hexadite is all about automatic response to cyber breaches. Each company has its own playbook of what to do when you've been attacked, when you get a red alert. And this playbook may include actions like gathering log from the compromised machines, getting the log of what compromised users did on the network, isolate machine. It's different between each company, right, per this company's specific procedure. With Hexadite, you can create your own playbooks. It's a very rich language. You can create your own playbooks that will automatically be triggered by a security event, and you'll have the UI, the user interface, to see where you are at each investigation phase, how many investigations are being done, which investigation are waiting for one of your specialists to take the next steps, and which have done and which are finished and collected the data, then so you can do your analysis. Now, Hexadite is now integrated only with Microsoft Windows Defender ATP, so it can be automatically trigger automatic investigation processes that are associated with alerts on the endpoint, but we're going to integrate Hexadite with our other ATP technologies, which will allow you to do automatic investigation for any security alerts at the endpoint in Office 365, at the identity level, and at the network level. This is critical for many organizations today because it basically saves time. We automate everything, which really leaves your security analyst to do what they really need to do. This is a more sophisticated job of making sense in the data where the technology can't really get to that level. It takes much of the tedious work from those security specialists and automate it. So now let's do a quick breakdown into the different technologies that Microsoft has for detect and response to threats. And let's start with Office 365. So what kind of technologies Microsoft has to detect and respond to threat in Office 365? And let's start with emails. Okay, so email today is a key attack vector. Many organizations are being attacked through the email. Email is a way to steal credential or to bring malicious files to the endpoints for end users to consume. And once you're using Microsoft Exchange Online, you automatically get our protection, Exchange Online Protection, which is a multi-filter approach to protect, to identify malicious emails and making sure that those malicious emails never get to your environment. So there's multiple filters here, and the idea in the filters funnels is to filter as much as possible emails and attachments before they get to the user, starting with the easy to detect suspicious emails down to those emails where we really need to invest CPU and energy to see if they're carrying malicious data. And the first kind of filter is based on reputation checks. Okay, so any email that is associated with a source that we know that is hostile from our security graph, from our intelligence base, any known patterns will be filtered immediately in the Exchange Online level. That will already cover 90% of the attacks, the spam, and the known phishing sources. After that, we'll do some more advanced capabilities. We'll actually look into the email content. We'll do content clustering, try to figure out if those emails include any content that might be malicious and capture that there. Then we'll move to machine learning models. That takes a little bit more time to filter suspicious files. And then we get to a level where we actually inspect the content. So we'll do authentication for the emails, sender authentication, spoof detection. We'll activate antiviruses on the attachments, ability to identify polymorphic malware. We have ATP, which is our ability to check and protect against the unknown, detonation chambers, safe links, links rewriting, which we're going to talk about later, and additional advanced phishing detection. After that, we'll go to some machine learning capabilities at the tenant level, and finally to analyst-specific rules that typically are transport rule in external protection. Another layer that we have is called a ZAP, which is zero-day purge, where if we get a signature of a new attack from the intelligence, we'll actually do a retroactive scan of emails that were already received, and we will remove those files that have a signature of what we just received from the intelligence. All right, so we got you all covered with external protection with respect to email protection. I do want to spend a few minutes about understanding the more advanced capabilities that we have. So we call it Office 365 Advanced Threat Protection, and this is a set of capabilities that we have to protect against those attacks, those advanced attacks like zero-day attacks, which the standard stack cannot really protect because there's no reputation checks, there's no signature that we can use to block those attacks. This is a new attack, nobody can detect it, but we do have technologies to make sure that those malicious emails don't get to the end user. There's multiple technologies here. The first is called, one of them is called safe attachment, is where we detonate attachment in a sandbox, see how they behave, and if they exhibit any kind of malicious behavior, we'll make sure that they will never get to the end users. We have safe download, is where we detonate URLs to download files before the users can do that to make sure that they're not suspicious. And we have safe links, where we wrap URLs that point to sites, so you can do a reputation check at the time of click. So every time you click on a URL, we'll do a reputation check to the destination that you want to go to. And if the reputation check failed, then we'll block access to those URLs. It works very easily. So once an email got to your Office 365 and passed all the filters I mentioned now, then the next filter, if it has an attachment, will be to take the attachment and detonate it in a cloud chamber. We'll wait a few minutes, up to 3 minutes, to see if this attachment exhibits any suspicious behavior, and if so, we'll make sure that it will never get to the end user. If the email had some download leaks, like pointing to some file that you can download, we'll do the same. We'll try to download the file, we'll not allow, and we'll prevent the user from downloading the file until we'll make sure that the file doesn't exhibit any malicious activity. And as I mentioned, safe links is how we wrap all the URLs in the email. So when the user presses the URLs, we'll do a reputation check at the time of click to make sure that the user doesn't hit any malicious site. And we do that because in many cases, the attackers will weaponize a website only a few days after they do the campaign. All right, so this is why we want to do the reputation check for the URL at the moment of click. Just some example, one of the delivery options for Office ATP is called dynamic delivery. And what happens here basically is when I send an email with an attachment to a user, and now Office 365 decided to detonate my attachment, the user will receive the email. When he'll try to open the attachment, he'll get a message that the attachment is now being processed to see if it's safe, and will return it to the email when it finishes, and that will take up to 3 minutes, right? So even if the users will immediately receive a notification that they got an email, and also they'll be informed that the attachment itself is being processed. Very soon, we're going to have a preview option. So when we get an email with an attachment that may carry a malicious or hostile code, we'll detonate it, but meanwhile, we'll create kind of a preview, a PDF that has no scripts, and we'll send it to the user, so at least the end user will have a preview until we'll make sure that the attachment itself is safe. That's an example for dynamic delivery. And here's another example for URL detonation. So I got an email, and in my email, I have a link to download the file. I'm pressing the link, but I'm getting a message from the system that the link is being evaluated, and I should come and try to download it again because we're not sure that the email, the attachment is really safe. Again, protection against the unknown, protection against malicious activity. A few words about threat intelligence. So Microsoft also has a technology called threat intelligence, and this technology is all about empowering your security operation with visibility to attack across your Office 365 environment. It includes email and attacks that may come from SharePoint Online and OneDrive for Business direction. Threat intelligence itself is a set of dashboards and tools that can help your security operation see the attacks and respond to the, investigate the attack and respond to the attack. What you see here is a dashboard. In the dashboard, the security operation can really see attacks immediately as the attacks are created or emerges, right? You can see how many emails are being processed and how many emails are being blocked by the different security filters. You can see which malware activity we see in your environment and what is a trend. If you suddenly get more malware activity, it might be that you're under a targeted attack. You'll be able to see the key alerts. You'll be able to see from which geographical locations the attacks are coming from. You'll be able to see which users are being attacked. Maybe the users, the attackers are attacking only specific users, like your admins or like your executive. We'll be able to see it from here, and you'll be able to see. You'll be able to compare your statistic to statistic from I would say from statistics that so compare statistics to statistics that you see from other companies in your geographical location or from your industry. So a very powerful set of dashboards for security operation to see attack, how the attack unfold, who's being attacked, and give them the general information. Now, once you're being attacked, the next phase is to do an investigation, and here we have a technology called Office 365 Threat Explorer. Threat Explorer is where your security operation can very quickly start an investigation, analyze the attack, do cyber hunting for the attack. And the way that you do that, in the Threat Explorer, you can very quickly slice and dice through all the emails and all the files across your Office 365 environment. All right. You can slice and dice, you can filter files by subject, by recipients, by file name, by attachment name, by malware activity, and if you want, you can also group the results, so you'll get very quickly answers to the queries that you do as part of your investigation. A very good example for the usage of this tool, I'll give you an example from a phishing attack scenario. Let's say that one of the employees in your company is coming to you and saying that, hey, maybe I got this email that is a phishing attack, and you look at the email and this is indeed a phishing attack that was able to work around your protection. The immediate questions that you have now is which other users may have received an email from that specific sender or with its specific message or content. You go to the Threat Explorer and you very quickly create a filter to find all the other users that received an email from the same source or with the same subject or with the same attachment, and you'll immediately get a list of users at the bottom of the report that answer this query. So now you are able to get to this list of users that may have been protected or may have been attacked or may have been gotten those suspicious files, and you want to take action. After you synthesize a list of users that may have been attacked by this specific as part of this specific breach, you can create an incident in Microsoft Office 365 Threat Intelligence and basically add all those specific users that may have been affected and take action. Take action could be to delete the attachment from those emails, to move those emails to junk, to move to inbox, or to delete the attachments. And once you activate and once you define the remediation action, you can also follow up and see what happened at each email. And that's how you can do an investigation, very quickly synthesize and get to the list of users that have been attacked and take action against those attacks very quickly. I would say this is probably the best of breed solution in the market today to do investigation, not only for email, but across the entire Office 365 stack. So I'm going to stop here for a second. Mike, are there any questions from the audience?
At this time, no, it's pretty quiet on air.
All right, so let's continue with other technologies. Next technology I want to talk about is how you detect and respond to threats in Windows desktops. All right, so a desktop is another very known attack vector. And this is typically how breaches begin, by taking a control over one of the endpoints, trying to escalate and get high privileges or steal a ticket of an admin and do a lateral movement in your network until they get to domain dominance. The component that is responsible on protecting against those attacks is called Windows Defender ATP. Windows Defender ATP arrives with multiple of enhancements and protection capabilities that are responsible on making sure, on preventing an attack. There's a lot of new capabilities in Windows 10, like a credential guard. Credential guard is how we run those processes that hold the tickets and the credential in a separate, highly secured virtual machine, so attackers can't really use an in-memory attack to steal those credentials. It's a very powerful defense against pass the hash, pass the ticket attacks. We have additional protections. You have a list here. I don't really have time to go over the list, but another interesting technology is application guard. Well, again, we run sensitive application in a separate virtual machine within the desktop. So even if the users take a remote control over those applications, if they try to get a hold of the computer, they'll see that they only have access to the virtual machines that run the process. So multiple security controls in Windows 10. But what I want to talk about today is how to detect and respond breaches or attacks that are able to avoid all of those technologies. And this is called Windows Defender ATP. So Windows Defender ATP, which is Microsoft EDR solution. EDR is a market name for endpoint detection and response, those technologies that use behavioral analytics and entity and user behavioral analytics and statistics to identify suspicious activities that might suggest a malicious activity in the desktop. So it's not based on signature. It's not an antivirus. It's not an anti-malware solution. It uses machine learning. They try to see the behavior of the machine, learn how it behaves, and any anomaly may suggest that this machine has been compromised, so it will send an alert. Specifically in Microsoft, one of our advantages in our solution is our unique intelligence. We talked about the global intelligence that we have through the graph, but also our ATP is an agentless solution. The ATP capabilities, the ability to detect suspicious activity, is built into the kernel. And when we're creating profile for your processes to see any indication of a malicious activity, we get to the resolution of memory allocation. So you can actually follow up on your processes and what they do with internal memory allocation. Any anomaly, any strange behavior, like creating like a processes are asking for more and more memory, may suggest a malicious activity, because maybe this memory allocation is just one phase before they load malicious content to the additional memory within valid processes. So we can get up to this resolution. Again, this is an agentless solution. It's built into Windows 10. It's not bolt on. It's a pure cloud solution. So you have nothing in on your environment, no agents. All this detailed information is going to the cloud, processing the cloud with our machine learning, and we'll let you know if we identify any anomaly, any strange behavior across all of your desktop. It also includes the best of breed investigation experience. So we keep information in the cloud for about 180 days, and you can go as an analyst and choose any time frame in the last 180 days and see exactly what happened on those devices if you're trying to investigate an incident that happened right in the past. It also comes with a few response capabilities that are all based on the Microsoft stack. So ability to isolate a machine, ability to activate antiviruses, ability to communicate with the users on the machine through Skype. There's multiple actions that Windows Defender ATP allows you to do as part of an incident. As I mentioned, Windows Defender ATP is a pure cloud solution. There's no agent. There's nothing that you need to install locally. From the kernel, we are load all those machine level logs, upload it to the cloud where you have into a machine learning virtual machine that you have in your tenant only, where we try to find those indication of attacks across all of your tenants. We get feeds from our cloud and from other sources, and security operation can access our web console to see the status, the security status of all of the environment and do investigation if needed. This is an example of the Windows Defender ATP Security Center. From here, you can see we get a high-level view for the status, the security status of all of your endpoints, of all of your users, all the alerts that we see, the health of the system. And if you see any machine that has any alert, you can drill down to the machine and do an investigation, or you can start an investigation that is associated with an alert. In the investigation, we can get really down to the bits and bytes of what's happening on the machine as part of the alert that we have identified. For example, here you can see an example for an incident, which is there's a kind of a privilege escalation due to a kernel exploit. We're able to identify an activity that is associated with an exploit that might be associated with a malicious activity. And down here at the process level, you can actually see the process flow. This exploit was used from a Word process that was activated from an Outlook when the user double-click on a file that he received. And that's a very powerful, very critical information for those security operations that are investigating this alert. Let's talk about detect and response to threat in the network. So threat in the network, from Microsoft's perspective, it's a lateral movement. It means that someone has breached into your network and now is starting to do lateral movement or reconnaissance in your environment to figure out where are the key components and how to move from the device that was compromised to other devices, so you can infect other devices, and maybe from there to go to your domain controller, where you can get domain dominance, create a golden key, and basically do whatever he wants in your environment without you even knowing about that. The technology that we have for that is called the Microsoft Azure Advanced Threat Protection, which is based on two capabilities. It's based on user and entity behavioral analytics, right? So once you install our technology, Microsoft Azure Advanced Threat Protection, it will take you like 3 weeks to figure out all the users in the environment, all the components in the environment, who's talking with who and at what specific time. And if suddenly a user is accessing a new service that typically it doesn't use, that will trigger an alert, because this is a suspicious activity associated with the user. Of course, our behavioral analytics database, the profile that we create, change dynamically as users per what we see in your network. The second database that we use to identify attacks, we have a database with predefined patterns of known attack. Pass the hash, pass the tickets are only some of the patterns that we can identify. In this case, if the same ticket is used from two different machines at the same time, that may suggest a pass the hash, pass the ticket attack on your domain controller, and we can identify that with our Azure Advanced Threat Protection. So here's a list of all the attacks or suspicious activities that we can identify with Azure Threat Protection. I won't go into the list because we don't have the time for that now, but we can identify reconnaissance attempts of users in your network to figure out how they restructure. Any reconnaissance activity that is suspicious will be reported. We can identify activity with compromised credential. Part of that is based on user and entity behavioral analytics. A user is accessing a service at which typically he doesn't access, that will trigger an alert. Lateral movement, we can identify pass a hash, pass the ticket. We know how to identify some patterns that are associated with exploits in your domain controllers, and also domain dominance, suspicious activity like golden ticket, skeleton key malware, and more. Very powerful technology to make sure that attackers are not currently working in your network without you knowing about them. Architecture, there's two ways that ATA work. One of them is by applying agents to the domain controllers, because most of the data is taken from the domain controllers, or using port mirroring. So you can use either agent-based to do port mirroring, so ATA will get information from the domain controllers. And why the domain controllers? Because the only way to do lateral movement in your environment is to go through Active Directory, and this is what we're trying to find, how the attackers are trying to leverage your Active Directory to do lateral movement in the environment. From a back-end specific, we have two mode of implementation. One mode is when the server is installed locally in your environment, and the second one is to have a cloud infrastructure. So you only have agents in your environment, but the entire solution is cloud-based. You don't need to allocate the machines. You don't need to allocate storage for the solution. Just here is an example of how an attack will be we'll look in advanced threat analytics or Azure ATP. For example, this is an identity theft using passive ticket attack, and you can see how the same administrator used the same ticket from two different devices, from a WAP server or web servers to Intune server. The same ticket was used to access the domain controller, and this is an indication of a hash passive ticket attack. You'll get an information. You'll see a contextual description of the entire attack, and you can take action. Another example that we have here is a brute force attack using LDAP simple bind. So the user is once in your network is trying to do a brute force attack to access to basically guess the password for some of your admins, and ATA or ATP will be able to identify that. So next, let's talk about detecting and responding to breaches in the cloud, right? So like we have Azure ATP in the on-prem environment that based much of its analysis on Active Directory traffic. In the cloud, we have a CASB technology that loads all of user behavior, user activity, user logs from the cloud, and process it in our cloud engines. Again, we rely on two kind of databases. We use user and entity behavioral analytics, so we try to figure out which users are accessing which cloud services and what they're doing within those cloud services and where they're accessing from. Any anomaly to the general profile of that specific user will trigger an alert, and we also have a predefined database of known attacks where we see these patterns. When we detect this pattern and it's associated with the user, we'll trigger an alert. And this capability is delivered by Microsoft CASB, so it's applicable to Office 365 and many other cloud services that we support with our CASB. And again, the idea here is to identify malicious user activity, identity activity in the cloud. Maybe an identity was stolen, the bad guys the attackers were able to steal the password, now they're in the cloud, but because the activities that they do in the cloud, we can identify that they are now in your cloud and you can take action. This is an example for an alert. So this is an alert for a specific user. This user is admin, but it exhibits a lot of strange behavior. Our CASB accumulated enough evidence to create an alert that determined that this user might be suspicious, like it's accessing from multiple locations at the same time. They try to log in multiple times until he gets the password. He's accessing from a new location. That's enough to trigger an alert. You can take immediate action here, like remove user collaboration, suspend the user, and many more. But you'll be alerted on any suspicious user activity across your clouds. That's just another example for an alert associated with file downloads. Let's talk about detect and respond threat at the identity level. So Microsoft also have a full set of stack to protect your identities. We track your identities at the global scale. It's not really what your identities are doing in your tenant. It's what your identities are doing globally. And then there's multiple kind of suspicious activities that we're looking for that are associated with your identities, right? Suspicious sign-in activities. The identity is logging in from multiple locations or from two different remote geographical locations that may trigger an event that your identity was compromised. Leaked credential, if our intelligence tells us that your identity's credential were offered to sell in the darknet, that might trigger or might make this identity to have some level of risk. Suspicious IPs, if the identity is coming from IPs that we know attacks are coming from, we'll mark this identity as compromised. There's many patterns we're looking for that may justify or may define this identity as possible at risk, and you can take. We'll provide you with dashboard where you can see all of your identities that are risk. What was the event? You can actually do an investigation. You can take action. Action can be to reset the password, to prevent access, or to challenge with MFA. All right, here's an example for an alert. This is a specific user called John Doe. Here are all the alerts that are associated with the user. One of them is called impossible travel, and you can see all the information here, how the user at the same time are trying to access from 2 remote geographical locations. And you can definitely take action like reset password or prevent access for this user to any service. So basically, or challenge with MFA. So every time the user is trying to access a service, he will be challenged with MFA. Anti-Phish. So we covered most of our anti-Phish capabilities. I do want to maybe talk specifically on Anti-Phish, because Anti-Phish is one of those main problem that many security operations have today. And let's talk about Microsoft technology stack to prevent those anti-Phish attacks. We do that. It's a multi-layer approach. We do that at the domain spoofing level. We do email authentication. We do implicit org spoofing, implicit cross-domain spoofing. Spoofing is not always a bad thing. Sometimes it's a legitimate action, but we have the technology to figure out if it's a legitimate spoofing action or is it part of a phishing attack. We do content-based phishing attack recognition. If it's attachment or URL, we can detonate them and see if those are malicious. If it's text, we can do content clustering to see if the context, the text that was sent may imply that this is a phishing email. Impersonation, we can identify impersonation if someone is trying to impersonate any of the users in your organization or to impersonate a domain of a supplier you work with. We can identify that. We also take it to the next level. So we have a full set of solution around the identity. Even if some identities were compromised, we have multi-factor authentication, we have machine learning that can identify malicious activity that is associated with your identities, so the attackers will not be able to leverage those identities that they stored as part of the phishing attack. A very comprehensive anti-phishing capabilities. If you want to learn more, please let us know, and we'll be more than happy to go over that with your security team. So that's the end of the session for today. I hope that you enjoyed it and I hope it was relevant for you. The idea is that Microsoft is well equipped to empower your security operation with the right tool, the right assets to identify and investigate and respond to breaches across the entire Office 365 estate with the best of suite, best solution in the market for that. If you want to learn more, please contact your account executive or account team, and they can help you schedule a security briefing where we can drill down more into the areas that are important to you. And that is the content for today. Thank you so much for your time. Mike, do we have any questions? I think you're mute, Mike.
There we go. Yes, we have two. The first is, this is great, but a lot to process. How can we get help implementing? And I think you mentioned that, but if you just want to reiterate.
Yeah, it's a lot. It's a very extensive suite. Microsoft investment in security is huge. Not too many customers know about that, but Microsoft is fully committed to secure its environment and provide a framework to help our companies secure it and monitor it from a security perspective. Best way to learn more is to talk with your account team, and they will schedule a security workshop with your security team where we can drill down into all of those technologies and help you both understand them and help you build a plan to evaluate and eventually integrate them into your portfolio, into your solution set.
And the last one said, great session. Will this be available on demand? And the short answer is yes.
Yeah, so we covered a lot today. Hopefully it was useful, and thank you so much for your time.
All righty. Thank you, everybody, for joining us today. That wraps up part 3 of our security broadcasts, and look forward to posting. You'll see an announcement out shortly on LinkedIn around our upcoming Faraway Friday. So if you have questions and things you'd like to ask around Modern Workplace, that will be coming to you shortly. Other than that, thank you again, Mike Giannotti and Amir. Bidding you have a great day. Take care, and as always, people, ciao.